You've said it before.
Maybe out loud, maybe just in your head. This is just who I am. The way you flinch in an argument, the job you settled into, the chair you always sit in without thinking. You call it personality. But look closer, and half of it was arranged before you ever had a vote. Furniture moved in while you were still learning to walk. In a moment, I'll give you a small, uncomfortable test. One question that shows you exactly how much of your life you've never actually chosen. The instant you realize that whatever you cannot refuse has quietly become your master. And by the end, you'll see what's actually left once that borrowed furniture gets cleared out. Not some hidden true self waiting underneath, just the quiet that remains when the noise finally stops. So let's start with the claim itself. Here's the plain version of the claim. Introspection is not the first move. It's the second. Before you turn inward and ask who you really are, you have to ask a colder question. Which of these thoughts did I actually choose, and which ones were just installed? Because the mind you're about to examine isn't empty, it's furnished. Someone else picked the chairs, and if you skip straight to looking inward, you're not discovering yourself. You're touring a room decorated before you ever walked in, and mistaking the decor for your own taste. That's the whole tension. Self-knowledge feels like digging, but sometimes it's just redecorating the same borrowed room and calling it insight. Seneca noticed this 2,000 years ago, and he wasn't gentle about it. He said, "Most of our trouble comes from living according to a pattern, arranging our lives not by reason, but by convention. We don't choose things because we need them, we choose them because everyone around us already has them." And here's the sharper part. Once enough people do something, it starts to look righteous. Not because it was examined, just because it was common. He put it almost mockingly, as if anything were more honorable simply for being more frequent. That's the script, named honestly in ancient language. And it raises the question we'll keep circling back to. If the pattern feels right, how would you even know the difference? Here's the mechanism that makes the pattern invisible. Human beings can normalize almost anything. A job, a relationship, a whole self-concept. You can adopt it for reasons you can't even reconstruct later. Ask yourself honestly why you chose the life you're living right now, and notice how often the answer collapses into, "I thought it's what I wanted at the time." That sentence should unsettle you a little, because the mind doesn't stamp borrowed preferences as borrowed. They arrive feeling exactly like yours, which means unplugging from the pattern isn't the finish line, it's the start. What was learned first has to be unlearned, or you'll keep examining a room you never actually left. Now, here's where introspection tries to rescue itself. It says, "Fine, just look deeper. Ask why enough times, and you'll hit truth." But there's a trap hiding in that promise. You can dig endlessly into a belief and never once step outside the system that gave you the belief. You end up congratulating yourself for insight that is, underneath, just obedience wearing a thoughtful expression. So the fix isn't abandoning introspection, it's interrogating the motive behind it before you trust a single conclusion. Ask who benefits from the answer you're about to reach. That single question is the difference between examining a belief and merely decorating it. And it goes deeper than culture. Even the raw material introspection retrieves isn't neutral. Carl Jung described two kinds of thinking: directed thinking, which is effortful and built with language, and fantasy thinking, which arrives on its own, spontaneous, made of images and old reminiscence. Most of what surfaces when you look inward is the second kind, not reasoned, remembered, which means the content itself is sediment, layers of history surfacing as if it were revelation. So the naive move isn't introspection itself, it's trusting the first thing that floats up as though it arrived from nowhere. Marcus Aurelius had a practice for this, and it's strangely practical for something so old. Catch your judgment first thing in the morning, he said, before affections, before the day's impressions have worked on it, while it's still free. And in that clean moment, ask plainly, is this actually right, or have I just never questioned it? That's the audit, in daily form. And here's a test worth sitting with, one I'd genuinely like to hear your answer to in the comments. What's something in your life you've never once said no to? Because whatever you cannot refuse isn't a preference anymore, it's a master. And inheritance, wearing the mask of preference, is exactly what this audit is built to catch. So the examined life doesn't actually start with, who am I? That question comes second. It starts with a smaller, less flattering one. Who told me this? And did I ever actually agree? Socrates gets remembered for self-examination, but look closer, and it was inheritance he kept interrogating first, before he ever went hunting for essence. This isn't a checklist, it's a disposition. Notice the reflex before you trust the reflection. When a thought shows up fully formed, fully certain, ask where it was standing before it got to you. And here's the turn worth remembering. Once you've done that audit, once you've cleared out the furniture that was never yours, introspection actually starts working. Not because you've unearthed some hidden true self buried underneath everything. There was never a secret self waiting in a vault. There's just less noise. Enough quiet that you can finally tell your own reasoning apart from an echo you'd mistaken for a voice. The self isn't a discovery. It's what remains after the audit is done. You were never asked to invent yourself out of nothing. That was never the task. You were only asked to notice, honestly, which parts of you arrived handed to you, still sealed, never opened. The examined life doesn't begin with an answer. It begins with the discipline to ask, of every conviction you carry, quietly and without flinching, is this mine, or was I simply never shown the door out of it? Sit with that question tonight, and if you find one belief you've never actually opened, I'd like to know what it was.